Ladies and gentlemen, I am not concerned about a recession. I'm actually concerned about something much worse. A recession is just when the economy produces less stuff for a minimum of 2 quarters. And yes, the stock market can fall as a result of that. But what is the bigger problem, and why is there no answer in any economic textbook for this issue? Let's go ahead and break it down. I am extremely concerned about stagflation. So we need to explain what stagflation is and what are all the scenarios on the table and why that is what I think is the most dangerous situation here. It is so dangerous that this is why I talked to the Wall Street Journal just a few weeks ago. I'll put that brief quote here and really lay this out. So this is a teaching video, all right? We're gonna get some education in. And for those that don't know or don't remember, I actually started my career before going into finance, before doing all that. I was a 7th grade math teacher. So I'm not gonna bring out the whiteboard here, but I am going to educate you, okay, on a little bit of economics and just how this whole thing works, all right? So let's just break this whole thing down. The definition, the basic definition of stagflation is this. You have high inflation, okay, stagflation, okay, but the inflation part is you've got the rising price of stuff. Well, what do we have right now? I'm recording this on a Monday, so stuff changes here, but we got tariffs. We know that tariffs are, you can call it indirect tax or direct tax, whatever it is you want to call it, but we know that tariffs are going to make things more expensive on us. Regardless if it's a tariff, regardless if it's just, companies charging us more money, whatever it is, the result is what was today's price is not yesterday's price, okay? What we know is if it was $1 yesterday, it could be $1.35 today, depending on what country it's coming from. Prices are going to go up if they have not already. So we have inflation, so that's number one. But to call it stagflation, you also need a slow, weak economy or even a receding economy. So what is it that is going to give us a receding economy? Here is the issue. We've already had the president of the United States start to pressure the Fed to lower interest rates. That is problem number one, because the Fed is already in a very difficult situation. Now, normally when you have high inflation, what does the Fed do? When you have high inflation, which we have seen over the last few years, at least since end of 2021, 2022-ish, we have seen the Fed do what? They increase interest rates. They want to discourage people from buying. For example, quick timeout. I know we've been talking a lot about investing today. However, if you don't know where to start or you haven't started yet, I have a free guide on how you can buy your first stock in just 20 minutes. To get that free guide, check out the link right here. All right, back to the video. When I bought my house, my interest rate was like anywhere between 2 and like 3.1% or something. Extremely cheap compared to what people are seeing now in 2025, right? They were very low, and they increased those interest rates to slow people down from buying homes, to slow businesses down. They want to tamp down demand. The economy is too hot. Let me slow y'all down and just relax. And that worked. Inflation was at one point 9.1%, and they have brought it all the way down to whatever the interest rate is. Whatever the inflation rate is now. However, it is still not down to a 2% number. But that's what they normally do. They will increase interest rates to slow people down. Well, here's the problem, okay? If you increase inflation, you make things more expensive because of tariffs, the Fed is supposed to counteract that by slowing down the economy, by forcing the economy to slow down by increasing interest rates. Well, that makes the economy weaker, and you have high inflation because of tariffs, which you, as a president, can continue to increase. And then you have the Fed increasing interest rates, and then you slow down the economy, and you are forcing higher inflation. That is moving things in the opposite direction, and that is forcing stagflation. Now, one of two things could happen. You could just stop the tariffs and force inflation back down. You could do that. That is an answer on the table, but I'm not entirely sure if the administration is competent enough to do that because they got us into this situation anyway. But that is one thing on the table. But that is the definition of stagflation. So let's flip that. Let's invert that and say, well, what if the Fed just cuts interest rates? Because that is what the president said. He said, hey, I think y'all should stop playing politics and just lower interest rates. Okay, just help us all out and lower interest rates, which I think is odd because the Fed is supposed to be independent. You can argue whether or not they are or aren't, but whatever, okay? Well, if you lower interest rates, you actually run into a separate issue, which gets us right back to stagflation anyway. How do you do that? Why and when does the Fed cut interest rates? Now, we normally do this when the market is down, like it is now, and when the economy starts to fall apart. Now, we don't officially have signs of that, but many people feel that way, right? And we saw this in 2020. We also saw this in 2008, and they do that to encourage people to spend. For example, I probably brought this up before, I bought my house and my interest rate was somewhere close to 3%. You don't find that now, right? But you are bringing down those rates, encouraging businesses to hire, spend money, encourage people to go out and buy a house and all that type of stuff. Well, if you are doing all that stuff, that doesn't really help consumers on a day-to-day other than bringing down their credit card rates, but that doesn't help you necessarily at the grocery store, does it? Especially if prices are elevated and things are unstable, and you can still increase the prices at the grocery store and everywhere else via tariffs. That doesn't really give people comfort, even as you continue to bring down those interest rates. Also, interest rates can go down to zero. Tariffs technically have an unlimited amount to go, right? So there is a zero you can go for interest rates. There is no limit that you can go for a percentage. So there's that too. But also, people are sitting on a record amount of cash. As of April 2nd, Americans are sitting on $7 trillion in money market funds, which means that people are concerned about what is going on sitting in cash, and it's actually not going to matter what the Fed does with interest rates. They are not going to go out and start magically buy houses just because interest rates come down by just a bit. They are saying, hey, the price of stuff is going up. Also, people are losing their jobs right now at the federal level. Who knows if that expands? Does it really make sense to make a major purchase right now? And the answer might be no. Why would they go out and spend? And again, if people aren't spending and they're sitting on record cash, remember, more than 60% of the US economy is based on what? Consumer spending. If people aren't spending, you have a what? A lower to weak economy, which again, you have tariffs bringing up the price of stuff, people sitting on cash and not spending regardless of what the Fed does by lowering those rates. You have stagflation again. So those two numbers are still moving apart. So the third answer is, yeah, I guess the Fed can just do nothing, which sure, that is an answer. Is it a likely answer when the president could just replace you and put anybody else in that chair? That is on the table. Last I checked, I could be wrong, but last I checked, correct me in the comments, I'm pretty sure that is within the president's purview. So there's that. Now again, I think the easiest answer, which is something I've said before, you could just get rid of the tariffs and clean this whole thing up. Is that easy? Is that realistic? Probably not, which brings us to this. What should you, the investor, do? A part of this is the stuff I've been telling you already, which is the stuff I've been telling you for months now. We started talking about tariffs, started warning you guys about tariffs. We started talking about stuff in Q4 about investments you may want to lean towards. If I'm not mistaken, earlier today, I think Netflix was up close to 5% earlier today. Now, what it is at the time you watch this video, different story, okay? Different story. But increasing the amount that you may have in cash may absolutely make sense. If you don't already have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, might be the time to truly focus on that and obviously not panicking. I still think that makes sense, right? But the thing is this too, right? We have talked about what to do in a recession, and a lot of those tips also make sense in a stagflationary environment because yes, while the price of stuff may be going up, yes, the economy may stay flat, you may still want to focus on the long term. If you want to know what those steps are and what those things that you may want to consider doing right now, you want to check out this video right here.